Please welcome House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer.
Thank you so much. I want to congratulate incoming President Betsy Corn and my dear friend and outgoing President Mort Friedman for their leadership of this organization. Thank you as well to Howard Corr for his continued efforts to make the U.S.-Israel relationship strong, resilient, and enduring. Let me also extend my thanks to Jeff Snyder, another dear friend who is stepping down from the AIPAC board this month. He has been and continues to be a significant and important leader on behalf of Israel. And I also, as no surprise to those of you who have heard me speak before, want to thank my dear, dear friend Howard Friedman, your youngest president of AIPAC ever. He's been a close friend of mine for many years. I'm going on so you don't give too much applause to Friedman. He'll never let me down. He's been a friend of mine for many years, accompanying me on my trips to Israel and serving as a trusted advisor. Howard and I made our most recent visit to Israel in August, my 15th visit. But we didn't come alone. Repeat that. We did not come to Israel alone. 41 of my House Democratic colleagues joined us on that visit. We looked out from the Golan Heights and stood in solemn memorial at Yad Vashem. We met with Israeli doctors producing miracles for so many, including Syrian refugees. We met with Israeli innovators developing irrigation technology to benefit people across the world and specifically in Africa. We gazed into Hezbollah-controlled villages and saw tunnels for terrorists along the Lebanese border. And we tucked our prayers for Israel's peace and safety into the crevices of the Western Wall. One of the freshman members who came with us had been anxious before her departure. She wasn't sure what to expect from her first visit. But on the last day, she tearfully told us that she understood what Israel is all about. That it is a land of complexity, a special place like America, whose diversity is reflected in its vibrant democracy, whose politics, as we have seen, are far from monolithic, where disagreements expressed through civil discourse make the country stronger, not weaker. An ally whose American supporters are liberals, conservatives, moderates, united by their faith, their passion, their commitment, and memory, lest we forget. When members of Congress visit Israel, they are reminded about what is at stake for Israel, for America, and for the Jewish people. It's unfortunate that we can't bring all 325 million of our fellow Americans to Israel to remind them of its history. One American who would like to go, apparently. Remind them of its history and help them associate the country's unique challenges, dangers, and importance to America. Because we cannot bring them all, we must bring Israel to them. That's why AIPAC is so important. AIPAC brings Americans together from across the political spectrum to understand the importance of the U.S.-Israel relationship and to strengthen it. In Congress, I am proud to be a leader in this effort to maintain and grow the broad, bipartisan consensus supporting Israel and the U.S.-Israel relationship. To be frank, however, there has been a lot of heated talk lately about Democrats and from some Democrats with regard to Israel. I've spent the last 50 years supporting the U.S.-Israel relationship. Let me make it clear. As a party, Democrats in the House stand solidly with Israel and the right of every Israeli to live in peace and security. Consensus among Democrats and Republicans in support of Israel continues to be the reality, and to suggest otherwise misstates the facts and weakens Israel. One of AIPAC's most critical missions is to make sure that everyone understands that. We cannot allow Israel's fortunes to ebb and flow with the waves of political change in any given election in either country. The relationship between America and Israel is not one of personalities, but of principles, one of shared values and mutual interests. Let us always keep that in mind. It is up to all of us to ensure that our fellow Americans in communities across our country understand that our bipartisan support for Israel in Congress is a strategic asset for Israel and also for America. It is also vital that we make sure they know the history that requires and demands support for Israel's sovereignty, survival, and success. When they forget how Democrats and Republicans have stood unequivocally against anti-Semitism, bigotry, and hate, those pernicious diseases that made the modern Jewish state so critical. When they forget, we must remind them. Unless they forget that people who march with those carrying swastikas and shouting Nazi slogans are not very fine people, we must remind them. When others forget the campaigns of terror that have targeted Israel since before and after its independence, we must remind them. If they forget how Democrats and Republicans together protected Israel with an Iron Dome and the latest in anti-tunneling technology, we must remind them. And if they forget that Democrats and Republicans in Congress stand up for Israel's right to defend itself and help maintain its qualitative military edge, we must remind them. When others forget that Democrats and Republicans have worked hard to provide Israel with crucial defensive security aid and loan guarantees, we must remind them. And we must remind them that we've done so and will continue to do so with no conditions. Because these are not just investments in Israel's security, but in America's as well. And there must never be conditions on protecting American security by maintaining the strength of our ally, Israel. When others forget that Democrats and Republicans are standing up to Iran together, we must remind them of that too. Congress is standing together to send a message to the President, to the United Nations, and critically to Tehran, that the UN arms embargo against Iran must not be allowed to lapse. And as long as I am the Majority Leader of the House of Representatives, I will do everything in my power to ensure that Iran never acquires a nuclear weapon. Israel's security and strength are linked to the United States being a global leader, one that is credible, one that values our alliances, and one that keeps its word. When others forget the importance of our alliances and the strength that comes from international engagement and their benefits to Israel's security, we must remind them. We remind them, too, that Democrats and Republicans are working together to oppose BDS. Both here in America and in the United Nations as well. That is because we see BDS as a discriminatory movement, one that rejects the right of the Jewish people to live in Jewish, democratic state in a land of their ancestors. Last July, as many of you know, the House passed a bipartisan resolution condemning BDS with the overwhelming support of Democrats and Republicans. Let me read you a short excerpt because the words we used are important. In that resolution, we said this: whereas, in contrast to protest movements that have sought racial justice and social change, the global BDS movement targeting Israel is not about promoting coexistence or civil rights or political reconciliation, but questioning and undermining the very legitimacy of a country and its people. America must not be fooled by BDS. And that is up to all of us. I'm told there are more than 3,600 high school and college students at Policy Conference this year. Betsy said 4,000. Welcome. Welcome. You, as Betsy said, are the front lines in this battle. And as surely as Israel relies on the extraordinary young people in the IDF, it relies on you for steadfast support and success. As successful as we are today, we must also be successful tomorrow on behalf of our ally and our strategic interest. You are here this week, students, to gain knowledge that will help you in your mission to go back and share Israel's story with your schools, your communities, your fellow students, your peers. Is there anyone here from the University of Maryland? Go Terps. My Maryland colleagues in Congress, including the late Elijah Cummings, we're proud to support you when your student government considered a resolution to divest from Israel last year. That resolution, because of your hard work, was resoundingly defeated. Thank you. No one should ever be made to feel threatened or ostracized for being pro-Israel. As I said last year, accuse me. Threatened not on campus, not in neighborhoods, not in schools, not in any meeting whatsoever, not anywhere. And when others forget that America and Israel strive for together, we must remind them. That's part of AIPAC's role. It's part of each of our roles. I give a speech, I say, about responsibility. If it is to be, it is up to me. Each of us ought to say that to ourselves. Both of our countries have struggled over time to live up to our founding ideals, and neither America nor Israel is perfect. Together, however, both strive to make our countries more perfectly reflect our values. And where other nations might stifle criticism of policies or governments, together we welcome it. That is the hallmark of our two democracies. We should never fear it, and we should never let it become personal. That is how together we continue the march toward justice, equality, and opportunity for our people and for all people. Whether we're Democrats, Republicans, or independents, together we must bear witness for Israel and explain why its security is so important, why history matters, and why bipartisanship matters. I said that we took a lot of people to Israel, 41 to be exact. And Kevin McCarthy, my counterpart as the minority leader, as the Republican leader in the House, took some 30 plus. And about 60 of us stood in a press conference in the King David Hotel in Jerusalem and spoke with one voice about our support for Israel. We can never forget. We never should allow our citizens to forget why Israel matters. It too is a land of the free and the home of the brave. If it is to be, it is up to us, and we must remind them. God bless and Godspeed. Thank you very much.
I'm Sephardic, and my family's from Syria. In our community, we definitely have a strong bond with Israel. It's something innate, it's something we grow up with, it's something our children grow up with. Many of us arrived to America because of unfortunate conditions in the countries where we were living. We were so happy to be somewhere where we weren't persecuted for our religion and where we were able to live freely. We didn't really want to make waves and speak up. The first year we came to AIPAC, I didn't really know what I was getting involved in. There were so many people from every part of America. Everybody was there for the same reason, to support Israel. What could be better than that? So I'm proud to say that the first time I came to AIPAC, there were about 10 members of my community. And this past policy conference, over 300 attended. We've become more aware that we do have a voice and we need to exercise that voice, and that we have opportunities to speak what we feel and make some changes. If you don't speak up, there's dangers in that, and especially when it comes to Israel. We're entitled to raise our voice, and we're entitled to speak out, And that's why I'm here at AIPAC.
Please welcome AIPAC activist Frida Franco and members of the Northeast Sephardic Council. Please welcome Senate Foreign Relations Committee member Senator Cory Booker.
Good morning. Oh, you all have to help me out a little bit. I grew up in a small black church where call and response is so important. Good morning. Oh, that is really good. In fact, if I was still running for president, I'd pass a collection plate right now. It is so good to be here in front of a crowd that is so representative of who we are. There are people from all over our nation. There are people from all over the political spectrum. Today, we are united in our firm purpose, unequivocally and resolutely. We believe in the state of Israel. We believe in the unshakable bond between our countries. We believe that Israel is our indispensable ally in an increasingly dangerous region and complex world. We believe in the right of Israel to defend itself against aggressors and terrorists. And we will stand with our ally in their defense and fully support them, ensuring that they have the means and the resources to provide for their security and ours. Now, I am the senator from New Jersey. And I have to say, I am so grateful to know there is so much Jersey in this room. I want to thank all of the New Jerseyans who are committed to this movement, who traveled so far down to participate in this important conference. In fact, 10%, 1 out of every 10 people in this room is from the state of New Jersey. And I want to give my gratitude to one of my constituents in particular, Mort Friedman, a friend of mine. For many years, he is now the chairman of the board of AIPAC, and I'm grateful to him and the entire board for the invitation to speak today. Now, I live in Newark, New Jersey. I love to hear the cheers over there. The Newark diaspora is wonderful. As many of you know, Newark is the home of Rabbi Yocham Prince. For those of you who don't know, he was an extraordinary rabbi who stood steadfast against the Nazis and was expelled from Berlin in the 1930s. In the United States, he saw the injustices traveling around the country, fighting for the support of Israel. He saw the challenges of injustice and segregation in the South, and he joined with civil rights advocates, knowing that it was critical for the Jewish people's struggle for freedom, that he joins in the larger, intrinsically tied freedom of the struggle of Black Americans. It was because of his conviction, his activism, his leadership that he had a distinction. In 1963, he was chosen as one of only 5 speakers to speak on the March on Washington. He spoke in the unenviable position of being right before Martin Luther King. But his speech was profound. He spoke about the dangers of being silent in the face of injustice. And he also talked about the urgency and the importance of us to understand the bonds between us and the strength that comes through our unity. He said, and I quote, "The time, I believe, has come to work together, for it is not enough to hope together. It is not enough to pray together, to work together." In that moral moment, as in this one, that is our call. It is our strength. It is our hope. It lies within our ability to come together as diverse peoples, to stand together resolutely and to work together. I say this because I have been all over this country speaking to what I believe is the challenge in this time. This is not a moment in our nation about left or right. It is a moment of us knowing right and wrong. And too much in America right now, we are a nation increasingly divided. God, when it comes to our purpose, we need a revival in America of civic grace. We need in our country to understand that patriotism is love of country, and you cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. And love is not sentimentality, it is and calls for sacrifice and struggle. It calls to working beyond our differences to find common ground, to affirm the truth that we share common values, that we have common purpose and common cause, and thus we must stand on common ground. And I am here today to say to you with this spirit, knowing this urgency, knowing the need to bring this country together, to reaffirm the truth that America's support for Israel is common ground. America's partnership with Israel has never been and must never become a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. It must always be an American issue, a bipartisan issue, our issue. This is our truth. It reflects our love of all people. It is this deep bond between the United States and Israel that has always derived its power from the fact that it has very little to do with what party or person is in power in either country. It has to do with the truth of who we are, how we treat each other, how much we're willing to sacrifice for each other, how deep our love is. As a United States Senator, I see it as my obligation, my duty to protect the bipartisan nature of this sacred friendship between Israel and the United States. And I call on all of us, no matter what your party, no matter what your race or religion, I call on all of us, everyone in this room and everyone outside of it, who care deeply about preserving that essential bond between our two nations. I call on you to guard against those who insidiously try to politicize the American-Israeli partnership for their own gain or divide us against each other, because together, as Rabbi Prince said in that moral moment, in that time, together we have work to do. There is no greater illustration of that than that ancient evil that is on the rise of anti-Semitism. We see it here at home when Jews are killed in their synagogue in Pittsburgh and in a kosher grocery store in my state in New Jersey. We see that hatred rising around the globe. There is an urgency before us. We together have work to do. As long as the people of Israel have to live under the constant threat of indiscriminate violence, whether it's emanating from Iran's destabilizing actions in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Syria, or from Hezbollah or Hamas or other terrorist groups, we must always as a matter of human values, stand for Israel's security and defense. Together, we have work to do. As long as Israeli citizens live under the horrifying threat of rocket attacks, we must continue our support for the Iron Dome, for Israel defense systems, for critical intelligence cooperation and key technology and resources essential for Israel's defense. As a senator, I will not equivocate. I will not hesitate. I will always support those programs, that resources, our partnerships, because together we have work to do. When amendments are introduced in the Foreign Relations Committee to try to block aid to Israel, when the dangerous boycott, divestment, and sanctions BDS campaigns try to undermine and isolate Israel, silence is complicity. We must always speak out against them. We must always stand against them. Together, we have work to do. Like you, I have long advocated for a two-state solution because it is the only pathway to a lasting peace. Those of us gathered together here today know that we stand for Israel's safety, security, and the right to exist as a Jewish state. We know that we must also, therefore, then stand for the human dignity, the human rights, the safety and self-determination of the Palestinian people. This, you know, are Jewish values. The love of neighbors. It's the Jewish value that sent Goodman and Cheney and Schwerner, black and white, Christian and Jewish. This value is why they died together in Mississippi. These are Jewish values. Tzedakah and chesed, it's core to the very ideals of what it means to be a human. It is Jewish values said by Hillel, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, then what am I? These are Jewish values. It's the song sung during the high holidays. Ki beiti beit tefillah l'chol choamim. May my house be a house of prayer for many nations. These are Jewish values. These are human values. They are our pathway to peace and security for all people. Lasting peace will be achieved when we renounce hatred and terrorism. When we sit down with our neighbors, Jew and Muslim, Israeli and Palestinians, and forge a pathway to that which has been dreamt of for generations. This is the pathway to peace. It's a pathway to strength. It's the understanding of what we must do together. Together we have work to do. But I want to say today, too often we talk about the conflict and the challenges, but we don't celebrate the truth and the fullness of Israel. It's important that we note what we all know. We support Israel not just because it is in our national security interest to do so, but because of what Israel means for the world. To ensure Israel's security means we are enabling and empowering a democratic nation of disproportionate innovation and ingenuity to do the work that is literally tikkun olam, literally repairing the world. Israel is helping to lead all of humanity in pioneering new technologies and developments to take on threats From global climate change to the looming crisis of global water security to global health epidemics, Israel is helping to lead humanity out of the darkness, out of the valley of the shadow of death. A nation of innovation, of creativity, and leadership for the greater good of all peoples, as Isaiah said, a light unto all nations. A light unto all nations. Those are Israel's values, and those are American values. This is our shared dream. On one of my many trips to Israel, long before I was a senator, my Israeli friend pointed out to me Mount Nebo. This was the mountain God allowed Moses to climb up to and look over and see the promised land. It is also the mountain that Martin Luther King spoke of in his final speech of his life when he said, I have been to the mountaintop and I've looked over and I have seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. Martin Luther King went to bed that night, April 3rd, and he woke on April 4th there at the Lorraine Motel. And soon after he woke in the morning, he went out onto the balcony and he was slain by an assassin's bullet. If you go to that site today at the Lorraine Motel, now a museum, if you go there, you will see written on a block of stone where he was killed the words of the Torah, words of the Old Testament. It's the words of Joseph's brothers. The words they uttered before they threw him into a pit to die, but he did not die in that pit. He rose up to lead a nation through crisis. The words written there where King was slain, the words of Joseph's brothers are these: Behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him, and we shall see what becomes of his dreams. My brothers and sisters, what will become of the dream? The dream of our ancestors, the dream of Israel, the dream of America. We have that dream in our hands now. What will become of the dreams? It falls on us right now, right here. What will become of the dreams? The dreams of peace and justice for all, for black and white and brown, Muslim and Christian and Jew, Israeli, American, Palestinian. What will become of our dream? Will it be degraded and diminished? Will it become divided against itself? Or will we, the Joshua generation, will we reclaim the dream? Will we reclaim the hope? Will we reclaim the promise of our ancestors who sacrificed and struggled and bled and died for the dream? What will become of the dream on our watch? Will we turn not against each other, but to each other? Will we lift each other up and not tear each other down? Will we work together so that in our generation, we will fulfill the prophecies of old? We will ensure that swords are finally beaten into plowshares. We will ensure that in our generation, justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Will we ensure that the dreams of those before us, that small black children and white children and brown children and Muslim children and Christian children and Jewish children will finally join hands and sing in a chorus of love that we are free at last, free from fear, free from violence, free from hate. That is the work we must do together with love. We together will keep America safe. We together will keep Israel safe. We will tikkun olam. We will keep between us an unbreakable, unshakable bond. Oh yes, my brothers and sisters, there is work to do, but my faith and my hope and my love know that we will rescue the dream. We will ensure that Israel and America remain a light unto all nations. May God bless you. May God bless Israel. May God bless all of God's children. And may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Please welcome Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, Arthur Stark.
Good afternoon. For over 6 decades, the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations has represented the consensus voice of the Jewish community to the U.S. administration and to world leaders alike. The Conference of Presidents proudly counts AIPAC among our 53 member organizations. Together, we have enjoyed a productive partnership, most recently under the leadership of AIPAC Chairman Mort Friedman and CEO Howard Kohr. Congratulations also to AIPAC President Betsy Burns-Korn. Betsy, like Mort before her, has been elected to the Conference of Presidents Executive Council, and we look forward to working closely with Betsy as well. And by the way, Betsy, a fabulous speech yesterday, a great call to action. For more than 30 years, the conference has been led by one of the great Jewish leaders of our time, the one and only Malcolm Hoenlein. As CEO, Malcolm has shaped history through his visionary leadership. Thank you, Malcolm, for all you have done and continue to do for the Jewish people. We are grateful that Malcolm will continue to provide us with leadership and strategic guidance as he works with our new Chief Executive Officer, William Daroff. William is well known to many of you for his vast experience and drive, and we look forward to his resolute leadership. But it is more than these exceptional leaders that makes us strong. Our greatness is manifested in the passion and commitment exhibited by all of you gathered here today. We live in complex times. On the one hand, the Jewish people have never been freer or more influential. At the same time, we face unparalleled existential threats. We experienced this paradigm just 3 weeks ago when the Conference of Presidents visited Saudi Arabia. In the past, it would have been unthinkable for us to break bread in that land. But this same kingdom shares common cause with Israel as they face a mortal threat at the hands of our mutual enemies, the nefarious Ayatollahs of Iran. Similarly, in January, we visited with the prime ministers of Greece and Cyprus, where the trilateral alliance between these one-time foes and Israel is flourishing so much that other countries are clamoring to join in. Together with them, we face the hostility of Turkey's president and his hegemonic desires to rebuild the caliphate. Yet, with all these threats and more, the greatest challenge we face is our own unity. History has taught us that infighting can be our downfall. We know that far from being a platform for bigotry, AIPAC is a platform for countering the bigotry that Jews world over are subjected to. With all the discussion over the years as to whether we have a partner for peace, right now we must look inside and commit to making peace amongst ourselves in support of Israel. We must set aside our partisan differences and find common ground in support of the U.S.-Israel relationship. We need not be unanimous, but we do need to be unified in our support. The U.S.-Israel relationship is stronger than ever thanks to the efforts of all of you. Together, we will make it even stronger. We will make our message loud and clear. We will not slow, and we certainly will not be stopped. My friends, you are the front line. Let us re-engage and re-enlist those who have not yet achieved your level of passion about the state of Israel from both within our faith and from outside. Let us strive to be unified, and together we will achieve new heights. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you.
Please welcome Mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be with you. I'm Muriel Bowser, Mayor of Washington, D.C., my hometown, our nation's capital, and the greatest city in the world. As mayor of a city like Washington, one of the most exciting and rewarding things I get to do is build relationships with communities, with leaders around the world. And last year, our ability to work closely with Israel got a little bit easier when we launched nonstop flights between Washington, Dulles, and Tel Aviv. Members of my team were actually on the inaugural flight last May, and then in June, I led more than 40 people from DC on a trade mission to Israel. Every one of us was grateful for that direct service, and it makes sense for us to make it easier for DC and Israel to work together. After all, Israel is the startup nation, and DC is the capital of inclusive innovation. When we team up, we know that anything is possible. During last year's trade mission, I had the pleasure of meeting with 3 mayors, the mayor of Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa. There, I learned so much about the challenges facing each of those cities. And we gained a true understanding of Israel's vulnerability in the region and in the world. In Haifa, we got a glimpse of just what is possible when great minds link up. It was there that we celebrated a new collaboration between Children's National Health System, based here in Washington, D.C., and the Rambam Healthcare Campus in Haifa. It is a partnership that will spur innovation and improve the lives of children and families in both nations. And that trip was just the beginning. It was the beginning of new relationships, new ideas, and opportunities. Opportunities to build solutions that challenge our city and challenge our people and the Jewish people around the world. Israel has been and continues to be an important trade partner for Washington, D.C. and the United States. Together, we will ensure that it remains so for the long term. Thank you so much for being in Washington.
Please welcome House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy.
Thank you. It's an honor to be back at AIPAC. I want to congratulate incoming President Betsy Korn and thank our outgoing President Mort Friedman for all the work that he has done and so much going forward. I also want to thank Howard Korr for his tireless advocacy for extending the invitation for me to address this important audience. For decades, we saw a broad and bipartisan consensus in support of Israel in America. Unfortunately, that consensus is under attack like never before. The United States is on the cusp of an anti-Israel movement gaining real political power. Just look what is happening tonight. While we are here defending democracy, Bernie Sanders is boycotting AIPAC. Instead of standing with Israel, he is campaigning with Congress' most vocal supporters of the vile BDS movement. In fact, at this very moment, one of them is getting ready to headline Bernie's rally in Minnesota. She is the same person who introduced a pro-BDS resolution in Congress last year, who says Israel's supporters have dual loyalty, whose anti-Semitic action caused her own party to draft a resolution to condemn her, and who attacked me for defending Israel, saying it is all about the Benjamins. You may know her as Congresswoman Omar. We, the Friends of Israel, must hold the line and beat back the dangerous trend of blaming Israel. So when AIPAC is falsely accused of bigotry, we are right to call it out. Because we know that AIPAC really stands for. AIPAC stands for unity. AIPAC stands for security. AIPAC stands for hope. That is why I will always stand with AIPAC proudly, persistently, and unapologetically. I guarantee each and every one of you this: as long as I am in Congress, I will never be silent about my support for Israel. To each and every one of you, the 18,000 citizen activists in the audience, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your dedication. I know AIPAC doesn't give a rating or endorsement, but I endorse you for what you are doing. The people in this room may come from different backgrounds and support different political parties, but each of us share a common goal. That is why we are here. Tonight, I want to focus on America's special relationship with Israel. Despite the growing influence of the vocal minority who would abandon it, I believe our special relationship is unwavering, precious, and worth protecting. Let me address several of those pillars. The first pillar is that it transcends political ideology. Our friendship with Israel is rooted in national security concerns, but it is also rooted in shared values such as sovereignty. For some reason, in violation of all common sense, Israel is condemned more than any other country by the so-called global community. Let me say that again. A responsible, democratic nation with the rule of law is rebuked more than dictators, simply for asserting its unquestionable right to be safe in its homeland. If it is morally backwards, nothing is. This may sound obvious, but it needs to be said. Israel has the right to defend itself from missiles and bombs and tunnels and knife attacks. The United States should let the world know where it stands. But how can America assure we never abandon our closest friend in the Middle East? It's up to Congress first. We have a responsibility to understand our alliance from every angle. And the best way to do that is to go to Israel with members, including from other parties. That is why I have visited Israel 5 times in 10 years with 189 Republican members of Congress. It is also why I work closely with my good friend, the Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, to make sure our trips are bipartisan. I'm proud to report that last year's trip brought over 15% of the entire House of Representatives to Israel at the exact same time. Think about that for one moment. 15%, as you see this picture, of the entire House is in Israel at one moment, Republican and Democrat, understanding the value of our friendship. These trips build camaraderie across the aisle on Israel and beyond. They benefit decision makers and decision making. This is its greatest value. Members tell me it is the most impactful trip they have ever taken. Now, the second pillar of our special relationship is that it is mutually beneficial. We see this not only in the realm of national security, but also in domestic values. In California, navigating water shortages is a reality for our residents, our livelihood, and our productivity. Our friends in Israel face similar circumstances. Until recently, Israel was considered to be a water-deficient country. It was not uncommon for residents to hear regular reminders of the need to preserve water. This problem lasted for decades until the innovation of Israel people broke through. Smart technology and policies transformed Israel from one of the driest nations on earth to what some describe as a water superpower. During my last trip, our members were asked to pick an issue to go to. I sat there and I watched California Republicans and California Democrats in a delegation meeting coming together to learn, hopefully, how to bring that technology back to California. It was actually the first time I've ever seen California members talk about our water issues without fighting. It seemed a little like a miracle. But as we all know from the first Prime Minister of Israel, who once quipped, "If you don't believe in miracles, you are not a realist." My point is this: United States and Israel are united by more than just military cooperation. Working together on science and technology is another way our relationship is beneficial to American interests and provides for greater security. I think the coronavirus is also going to bond us together to show the world what we can do with technology and others to save people who even disagree with us. That is why Congress is working to expand security assistance to Israel to include non-military cooperation. Now, the third pillar of our special relationship is that it is a priority. The Trump administration has proved this sentiment time and again. Weeks before his inauguration, President Trump announced his intention to relocate the U.S. Embassy to its rightful home in Jerusalem. And I made sure to take every member of Congress to that embassy for a picture. As we know, previous presidents talked about it, but this president acted, and so the embassy moved. Some predicted the move would lead to chaos. They were wrong. The president recently announced Middle East peace plan is another example of our unwavering commitment. Past administrations have shied away from this complex issue. President Trump leaned in. His plan offers a pathway to a brighter future. It is a significant step towards the universally desired goal of peace and stability on just and fair terms. It should be seriously considered by everyone. Then there is the UN arms embargo on Iran, which expires on the 47th anniversary of the October War. If that happens, the consequences would be steep. It is the interest of preventing more violence. The embargo must be extended. And once it is, America and all peaceful nations must redouble our efforts to ensure it is vigorously enforced. All these actions send a simple message to our Israeli friends. America will never set conditions on Israeli security assistance. America will always have Israel's back on the world stage. America will not revoke our commitments or renounce our values. And most importantly, America reaffirms our unbreakable bond. The final pillar of our special relationship is that it is enduring. Our ties began only 11 minutes after Israel's independence, when the United States was the first nation to recognize the state of Israel. Since then, we built a bilateral relationship almost without comparison. Today, we built a robust security alliance to protect our citizens and stabilize the Middle East. Together, we built new technology to grow our economies and strengthen the middle class. Together, we built vibrant democracies to practice our beliefs and pursue happiness. America is grateful for our friendship with Israel. We are a better nation because of it, and we must never shy away from defending it. It is our responsibility to pass it along to the next generation. This is the only way it will survive. And that's why we need the 4,000 students that are here today to hear it. To them and the others, I said, Ronald Reagan said that freedom is never more than one generation from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on. That same applies to our bond with Israel. Friends, we cannot allow those who accuse AIPAC of bigotry and dual loyalty to smear us and the special relationship we fight for every day. Our mission is too important to let them succeed. Now is no time for silence. More than ever, we need your strong voices walking the halls of Congress. More than ever, we need your clear support for Israel and your opposition to anti-Semitism made clear to any candidate who seeks your support. More than ever, the future of your special relationship depends on you. Our task is to maintain American support for Israel in both parties. And know this, you have my complete and unshakable commitment. Long live the relationship of America, Israel, and democracy for the rest of the world. God bless.
Please welcome Senate Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I just got here. McCarthy didn't speak as long as I thought he would. I had to rush up. They said, do you want makeup? I said, Gornish Telfin. Do you young people know what that means? Anyway, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me at the largest gathering of Americans who support the United States-Israel relationship. Thank you for coming and supporting Israel. Now, let me begin on a happy note. At least some Jews can play basketball. The Yeshiva University basketball team, they're known as the Maccabees. They won their conference and just qualified for the NCAAs. Now, I wasn't that good. I wasn't one of those Jews who could play basketball. I played at Madison High School. And our team's motto that year was, we may be small, but we're slow. Anyway, I want to thank your great leadership, your new president. She's going to do a great, great job, Betsy Burns-Korn. Mort Friedman, the board chair, Howard Corr, Esther Kurtz, and my dear friend and fellow New Yorker, Bob Cohen, all of whom have dedicated themselves to strengthening the bond between the United States and Israel. And I want to recognize all your distinguished guests and all of the members of AIPAC, all of you who keep the organization so strong, especially my fellow New Yorkers. Raise your hands, New Yorkers. But I love all of you from all the other 49 states, too. Now, I want to thank you all for what you do to strengthen not just Israel, but the United States. And I am so proud. I've been told that there are many students here. Students, stand up. There are more than 4,000 students here supporting AIPAC. God bless every one of you. And you know, students, I have a grandson, Noah. He's 1 year old. He learned how to climb up the stairs, crawl up the stairs, and crawl down backwards. He's a genius. But when he's older, I hope he is like you, the students in the crowd today. Because you come here and do what you are doing, educating the world about the history of our people. As we all know, many of your peers do not know the long history, the struggles, the persecution of the Jewish people, and why it's so important to all of us to have a strong Israel and a strong American-Israel relationship. But you students, you will teach them, and one day, God willing, my grandson Noah will be joining you in doing the same thing. Now, tonight I wish to speak about the need to maintain strong support for Israel, a strong bipartisan relationship, and the threats to Jewish communities that we are facing around the globe. There's no question that the state of Israel has come a long way in the past 70 years, but threats to the land of Israel and to the Jewish people are growing, and unfortunately have been for some time. The international community at the United Nations never misses an opportunity to single out Israel for condemnation. Hamas is still intent on kidnapping and killing Israeli citizens. An increasingly desperate Iran plots to undermine Israel in every way. Iranian proxies are operating in Lebanon and Iraq and Yemen and Syria. And the chaos in Syria and the Middle East sits on Israel's doorstep. A little over a week ago, rockets landed in a playground in Sderot. A playground, that's where they sent rockets. So my friends, the safety and the security of Israel must always be a priority, a high priority of the United States. And as long as I am leader in the Senate, support for Israel's security in the Senate will be non-negotiable. But we can only hope to defend Israel from these threats so long as we maintain a united front, Democrats and Republicans together. We all know that the winds of politics are changing. They blow fiercely during election years like this one. But no matter how fiercely the winds may blow, we must not let support for Israel be caught up in the maelstrom. The friendship between our two countries must be unshakable. The friendship between the bond between us must be unbreakable. Support for the friendship between our countries does not depend which party you belong to. Plain and simple. And no matter what, we must keep the U.S.-Israel relationship bipartisan. This has been a mission for me, and it must be for you and all the friends of Israel. So whenever I have led a piece of pro-Israel legislation, even when Democrats had the majority in the House or Senate, I always made sure I had a Republican equal co-sponsor, because the foundation of our relationship must remain bipartisan as it has been for decades. I am proud, very proud, that the overwhelming majority of Democrats support a strong U.S.-Israel relationship. We have and we always will. Now we know there are those who seek to use Israel as a way to score political points. They treat Israel as another talking point, another way to stoke resentment between the two parties in Washington. My friends, these voices do a disservice to both Israel and to the United States. Our politics may be more polarized than ever, but it's incumbent on all of us who care about the U.S.-Israel relationship to keep it bipartisan. The relationship between the U.S. and Israel transcends any single party, any single election, any single president. As you know well, the security assistance that AIPAC champions every year is passed by both Democrats and Republicans in Congress because both parties believe that Israel must maintain a qualitative military edge to defend herself. Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow 3 missile defense systems, all of which defend Israel from attack, are funded by both Democrats and Republicans in Congress. The Taylor Force Act, which stops funding that directly benefits the Palestinian Authority until it ceases payments to imprisoned terrorists or their families, was passed by both Democrats and Republicans in Congress. I helped lead the way for that. A resolution opposing BDS and efforts to delegitimize Israel passed the democratically controlled House with 398 votes, the vast majority of Democrats and Republicans united, and that's how it is, and that's how it must continue to be. Americans from across the political spectrum, Democrats and Republicans, liberals, conservatives, independents, must continue to stand united in their support of Israel. It's in America's interest to stand with Israel. And our ardent support for Israel does not mean we lose sight of the goal, supported by Israeli prime ministers and presidents of both parties of two states, living side by side in peace and security. I have no illusions about the prospects of peace at this moment in our history. I've spoken on this stage many times. Every year I'm proud to speak. And I've spoken about the history of intransigence by Palestinian leaders and too many in the Arab world to recognize Israel the only Jewish state. Sadly, while some progress has been made, those days are not yet behind us. But the possibility for a two-state solution must still be maintained. A two-state solution that ensures a safe, secure, and democratic Israel that can live side by side with a demilitarized Palestinian state that provides dignity and self-determination for the Palestinian people. The only way, I know that's your position, and that is mine as well. The only way a solution can be achieved is through direct negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians, not by international pressure campaigns, not by the BDS movement, not by solutions imposed by foreign capitals. Unilateral action taken by either side could diminish the prospects of future peace. Unilateral action might even foreclose the pathways to peace. That has always been AIPAC's position, as it should be. Real diplomacy through direct negotiations, while a long and arduous road, is the only path for a durable peace between the Israelis and Palestinians. We must not shut the door on the peace all of us in this room want to see. We must keep that prospect alive. The administration should resume funding to organizations that bring Israelis and Palestinians together. I join AIPAC, and I'm so proud that AIPAC has supported bipartisan legislation by Senators Coons and Kaine, Democrats, Graham and Gardner, Republicans, known as the Partnership for Peace, which supports joint economic ventures between Israelis, Palestinians, and Americans, as well as programs that bring the next generation of Israeli and Palestinian leaders together. I'm proud that AIPAC supports these efforts. The extremists on both sides who pretend that the other side doesn't exist or is just going to disappear are living in a state of denial. Together we must strive for a secure peace. L'chaim. Now, just as we must continue to support our friend and ally Israel, so too are we called on to confront a greater and more ancient threat to the Jewish people, anti-Semitism, the poison that chased countless Jewish people from Europe, including my family, and killed so many who remain, including many of my relatives. The same poison that scattered the Jewish people to the winds and made us foreigners in our own countries, that poison, that same poison, unfortunately, tragically, is beginning to fester here in America. Over the holidays, usually a time of peace and rest with family and friends, there were several vicious attacks on Jewish communities in America. A kosher deli in Jersey City was the target of a mass shooting that wounded 7 and claimed the lives of 3 Jews, including a prominent rabbi in the home borough of Brooklyn. I just saw his father yesterday when I visited the Satmar community. Not 2 years later, on the 7th night, not 2 weeks later, on the 7th night of Hanukkah, a man attacked a gathering of Orthodox Jews in Muncie, New York, with a machete. And these are only the latest example of the rising tide of open and anti-Semitic violence that has visited synagogues from Pittsburgh to Poway, California. Anti-Semitic violence on our streets and in our schools. Anti-Semitic violence at the home of a rabbi on a quiet Hanukkah night. My friends, the rise of anti-Semitism in the United States is a national crisis that all Americans must fight. I do not use those words lightly. The history of anti-Semitism in the world has taught us to appreciate what America has meant to the Jewish people and how much better things are here than elsewhere in the world. But the people of our faith have learned the hard lessons about how anti-Semitism and violence against Jews walk hand in hand. We have learned hard lessons about how anti-Semitism thrives in societies where bigotry goes unchecked, where the idea of truth is questioned, and where propaganda and conspiracy theories flourish. We have learned the hard lessons about how, when people of goodwill and good faith are silent or dismissive, anti-Semitism grows and gathers force. In Germany, in the 20s and 30s, when the Nazis began their long campaign of violence and dehumanization against the Jews of Germany, too many in Europe, and too many of them Jews, here in America, were silent. Too many called them isolated incidents and did not speak out forcefully. And we all know what happened. There are so many differences between our age and the 20s and the 30s, thank God. But we have learned that anti-Semitism, unchallenged, unbridled, will grow and gather strength. We cannot and must not allow anti-Semitism to gather any more strength. And we must do all we can to protect our vulnerable institutions. So on this stage, surrounded by friends of Israel and the Jewish people, I call on Congress to quadruple funding to protect at-risk synagogues, at-risk shuls, at-risk yeshivas, and other houses of worship where our families gather to provide the hardened security we need so this will not happen again. I need your support to tell members of Congress how important this is. My friend, who you heard from a little while ago, Chairwoman Lowy, has been a strong supporter of this program. I want to thank her again tonight. In a time of moral emergency in the 20s and 30s, too few spoke up and did what was necessary to face down anti-Semitism. We, our generation, will not make the same mistake. We will educate the next generation about what can happen when we forget the past. A genocide not properly remembered can lead to another. And that's why I'm proud to support the Never Again Education Act, led by Senators Rosen and Langford in the Senate, which expands and authorizes new new resources for Holocaust education in our schools. I will use my power as minority leader to pass this bill through Congress and show the world that America will never forget the painful lessons of the Shoah. We all know this will be a difficult year. The fires of partisanship already burn brightly. A national election will douse fuel on those flames. But we must never, never, never let that partisanship poison the bipartisan support that Israel has always enjoyed. We must never, never, never let support for Israel be sharpened into just another partisan shiv, another tool in the arsenal of political peddlers and party strategists. That is the path, surely, to ruin. The state of Israel has been able to count on the support of the United States from the days it drew its very first breath, when President Harry Truman became the first to recognize Eretz Yisrael as a member of the family of nations. It was another president, President Kennedy, who said that, quote, "Friendship for Israel is not a partisan matter. It is a national commitment." These words, that national commitment, has inspired me my whole life. From the time I listened to my transistor radio, to the newscasts of the 6 Days War, praying to Hashem that Israel would survive, to the time I listened to my predecessor in the Senate, Senator Moynihan, go before the United Nations as our ambassador to defend Zionism and condemn the hypocrisy of the United Nations. Up until this very moment, I have never once doubted the commitment of our nation to support Israel, and I intend to continue the great work those in the past have done to keep it that way. Now we're going to have hard work to do. But Israel, the small sliver of land that has represented the hopes, the dreams, the aspirations of the Jewish people for over 2 millennia, is worth the effort. And I swear to you that as long as I am the Democratic leader, as long as Hashem breathes air into my lungs, I will do everything in my power to maintain the unshakable, unbreakable friendship between Israel and the United States. Am Yisrael Chai. The Jewish people live. Long may they live here and in Eretz Yisrael. Thank you, AIPAC.
The relationship between Israel and the United States is anchored in our shared values, our shared strategic interests, and the partnership that we've had with Israel from the very beginning. It's important for this generation of Americans and leaders to continue that bipartisan relationship moving forward.
This delegation is one of the largest delegations that's ever come to Israel. You have about 15% of the United States Congress here during this visit.
There's something about Israel that's sort of special. People realize that when they come here. But when you're talking about how we have supported each other in really historic events, it's that shared history from 1948.
Being in Israel has reinforced my view that Israel will be protected by a bipartisan approach. There's no question about it. We've always said that. It's even more important now.
It's not a political relationship. It's a values-laden, values-centered relationship. It's important to come here with a joint message of support and commitment to Israel's success.
We all have mutual interests here. That's something that you don't really appreciate or fully understand until you're on the ground here.
Sitting down in a bipartisan group, looking at the Iron Dome, going to the border of Syria, sitting down with the Prime Minister, sitting down with entrepreneurs and their startups. This is an understanding that you can't just get by reading it, but actually living it.
You have a really important opportunity to take a strong relationship that exists and build upon it in a way that doesn't just benefit the U.S.-Israel relationship, but also contributes to Democrats and Republicans being able to work together on other issues as well.
I think one of the best things about the trip is the fact that they have overlapping days where we have a bipartisan environment, which doesn't happen often in D.C., but around Israel, we get a better chance to do that and have some deep conversations that will now enable us to understand why it is so imperative that the United States continue its great relationship with Israel.
It was fantastic that both Republicans and Democrat members of Congress came here together to show a united front to Israel that we are your ally and we are here for you.
Israel is our strongest ally and will continue to be our strongest ally. And peace is what we strive for, and my colleagues on both sides of the aisle can all agree with that.
The well-being of Israel, no question, is a bipartisan issue. When I see my colleagues experiencing that same eye-opening about the soul of this country, about what Israel is all about, in its entirety, I think that creates a universal passion for securing this state.
Please welcome Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
Well, it's great to be here again this year. For starters, I need to thank the leaders here today who work constantly so that our nation continues to stand with our friends today, tomorrow, and together. So Betsy Burns Corn, Mort Friedman, Howard Corr, thank all of you. And all of you who witnessed the world-changing friendship between the U.S. and Israel. You know, in many ways, this year's conference marks a promising time for U.S.-Israel and our relationship. The Trump administration has reaffirmed the importance of this friendship. We've moved our embassy to Jerusalem. We've recognized the Golan Heights. We've made it clear we have Israel's back. More broadly, the United States is rebuilding our armed forces so friends and adversaries alike will not doubt our capabilities. And we've taken shared enemies like Iran's master terrorist, Soleimani, off the battlefield. So all of us in the pro-Israel community have much to celebrate, but we must also be honest and clear-eyed about the challenges. And that includes a dangerous shift in our politics here at home. For most of my career as a mainstream Republican internationalist, my foreign policy views fell within a bipartisan consensus. For more than a generation, we trusted that certain big-picture goals were widely shared within both of America's political parties, like standing with Israel, projecting power in the Middle East, standing up for democratic values before crises arrive on our shores. These basic pillars have paid dividends for our allies around the world. Look at the modern state of Israel. In 1948, the Middle East was much more distant from us than it is today. But because Americans understood the world did not end at our shores, we partnered. We partnered with Israel and stood by her people as they built a democracy. In fact, they built such an energetic democracy that they just had their third election in the last year, and you've just been hearing about it. But our consensus was not just good for friends like Israel. It's been good for America. Our internationalist approach and post-World War II order have benefited this nation immeasurably. Victory in the Cold War, unprecedented global peace and prosperity. Sure, Americans had intense debates on specific foreign policies, but it was conflict within that broad consensus I was referring to earlier. We're not arguing about whether to stand with Israel, whether to stay engaged in the Middle East, whether to maintain a physical footprint in the region, but rather about how. However, my friends, today I'm afraid this consensus is eroding. Some loud voices have stopped asking how best to do these things and have started asking whether we should be doing them at all. Should we really stay engaged beyond our shores? Should we really stand with Israel? Should we have any military footprint in the Middle East? The basic premises behind our success are unfortunately now up for debate here in America. This is not confined to one side or the other. There are some Republicans in Congress, in my view, sometimes vote in ways that would advance retrenchment and isolationism, particularly regarding the Middle East. I've spoken out publicly within my own party, including on the idea of an abrupt withdrawal from Syria, which the president wisely reconsidered. So I do not mean this as a partisan jab, but we must recognize these tendencies are not affecting both parties equally. We cannot ignore that in today's Democratic Party, what we once were easy questions have become divisive flashpoints. Standing with Israel, defending our presence in the Middle East. These things were once givens. Now, they seem to be controversial. They yield heated debates or heavy caveats. Over a year ago, I wrote an amendment to put the Senate on the record. I meant it to be a bipartisan reaffirmation of an active American role in the Middle East and a warning against reckless withdrawal. 22 of my Democratic colleagues voted against it, including the Democratic leader, Senator Schumer, and 6 of the 7 who went on to run for president. Consider this very conference. Who shows up? Who literally stands with you? In 2008, candidate Barack Obama made sure to attend. He called you, quote, friends who share a strong commitment to make sure that the bond between the United States and Israel is unbreakable. In 2016, Secretary Hillary Clinton would not have missed this conference. She called the U.S.-Israel alliance, quote, more indispensable than ever. But my point is, look how things have changed. This year, few leading Democratic presidential candidates even made the effort to show up. I know the former vice president addressed you by video, though not in person, and he felt compelled to justify his participation by telling one activist he was speaking to you in order to try to change your views. Others, including the senior senator from Massachusetts, have made a public point of avoiding the gathering altogether. Then there's the senior senator from Vermont, the current front runner. Not only did Senator Sanders skip the conference, he bashed it publicly. He said, you all provide a platform for bigotry, and he called Israel's democratically elected prime minister a reactionary racist. Democratic candidates used to be proud to stand alongside Israel and AIPAC. Now, some jockey to see who can get the farthest away. I've worked with Israeli governments of any party during my career, whether I agreed with every move or not. So look, I'm going to keep doing that, whether the Israeli government is left or right or both. I've also worked my entire career to stand against anti-Semitism. We need to denounce it wherever it emerges. Whether it's from the alt-right or the far left, in Europe or the Middle East, or here at home. I've called it out whenever I see it, including on my side of the aisle. But this time last year, the House Democratic leadership had difficulty doing even that. Even when the shadow of anti-Semitic comments appeared within their own ranks, a quick and clear denunciation proved impossible. For more than a year, the House has slow-walked legislation to oppose the BDS movement, apparently rejecting an anti-Semitic boycott that compares Israel to apartheid in South Africa is now somehow in the House Democratic Conference controversial. And just yesterday, a sitting Democratic Congresswoman libelously stated that AIPAC's agenda is to dehumanize Palestinians, imprison Palestinian children, and promote Islamophobia. This needs to stop. The American people deserve a debate about how we stand with Israel, about how we lead in the world, not whether we do so at all. The recent election in the United Kingdom showed us how quickly the far left's flirtation with anti-Israel and anti-Semitic views can migrate from the fringe right to the front burner. I hope we're not living through the Corbynization of one of our major political parties here in the United States. I hope we can restore the bipartisan consensus that served our nation, Israel, and the world so well. But it appears, my friends, we will need to fight for it. Every American who's a friend of Israel has an obligation to police our side. We have an obligation to stamp out the first embers of anti-Semitism and to fight for the policy consensus we support. Let's face it, Democratic leaders may not often turn to me for advice. I admit it, they don't. But we know they will turn to you. So I want to thank you for your work, for your conviction. You are why I remain hopeful and optimistic about the future of this vital relationship. And thank you in advance. And thank you in advance for reminding the leaders who want your support that without American leadership, the world is more dangerous. Without American influence, the Middle East is more troubled. And our nation's friendship with Israel is not negotiable. Thank you for all you do. Good luck on Capitol Hill. Our goal together should be to return support for Israel to a fully bipartisan basis. Regretfully, my friends, that is not the case today. I'm counting on you to turn that around. Thank you so much.
Please welcome Senate Foreign Relations Committee Ranking Member Bob Menendez.
Good morning. There may be one or two other things happening in the world, both here and in Israel, making headlines today, but I think this is the most important event happening right now for the future of U.S.-Israel relations. Every year that I stand at this podium, I'm proud to see a room full of advocates and friends. And I especially want to recognize my dear friend, a great New Jerseyan, your steadfast leader, and an all-around mensch, Mort Friedman. He's done a fantastic job for AIPAC. Mort is just one of the hundreds of New Jerseyans that I am proud to see here today. You keep the U.S.-Israel relationship Jersey strong, so welcome. And before I continue, I want to make something clear. I stand before you today not only as the ranking Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, not only as a lifelong friend to Israel and the Jewish people, not only as the highest ranking Latino in the United States Congress, I also stand before you as a fellow fighter in humanity's unending struggle against hatred in all of its forms. So make no mistake, you will never see Bob Menendez speaking to an organization that foments bigotry in any form. I am always proud to address AIPAC's policy conference. And I am always honored to stand on this stage. And that's because I know the people here today always stand up against hate. This organization does not foment hatred or support bigotry. On the contrary, this organization has worked painstakingly for years to bring people together. This organization stands on the side of those advocating justice, dialogue, peace, and the right of all people to live with dignity. And if anyone from any political party thinks otherwise, they should take the time to come themselves instead of castigating from afar. Now, here's what I know. You are the backbone of a strong U.S.-Israel relationship, rooted in our shared values and common dreams. And I stand with you against the many forces that seek to undermine the U.S.-Israel relationship and even Israel's very right to exist. Now, many have heard this before from me, but I believe in three fundamental truths that bear repeating today. One, the security of the United States is strong when Israel is strong. Two, the Jewish people have a right to live in peace, security, and prosperity in the indisputable homeland of their ancestors. And three, Israel has a right to defend herself, and the United States will always ensure she has the capabilities necessary to protect her people and her borders. Now, despite what some fringe elements of the right or the left of American politics may say, there is simply no disputing the facts about the strength of America's bond with Israel. The Congress has consistently voted to provide security assistance to Israel in an overwhelmingly bipartisan way.
Congress has consistently voted to impose tough sanctions against Iranian malign activities that threatens Israel's existence and U.S. interests in the region in a bipartisan way. And Congress has consistently defended the right of the Israeli people to live in peace and security. That is unmistakable. Now, I won't pretend that from time to time, my colleagues and I may disagree on how we confront some of these challenges. But there is no disagreement on this. The bond between America and Israel is unbreakable and ironclad. Unfortunately, every year that we come together, we find no shortages of threats imperiling Israel. To its south, Palestinian Islamic Jihad continues to threaten innocent Israeli civilians. No country on earth should be expected to stand by as a terrorist organization continues to attack its citizens. In Lebanon, Hezbollah has solidified its grip on the cabinet and continues to threaten Israel's security. And on its northern border with Syria, Iran and its proxies enjoy the blessings of both Bashar al-Assad's murderous regime and the backing of Russian air support as they expand their footprint and inch ever closer to Israel. The Israeli people have witnessed the human cost of this conflict firsthand, from the brave IDF soldiers who defend Israel's northern border to the healthcare workers who treat injured Syrian civilians in Israeli hospitals. We must use the full weight of American diplomacy to bring an end to the strife in Syria, alleviate the unimaginable, devastating human suffering, and ultimately create greater stability for Israel and the broader region. Here's another undeniable fact. Despite the economic constraints placed on Iran, this regime refuses to abandon its campaign of terrorism and its sponsorship of proxies fixated on Israel's destruction. Just as disturbing, today, Iran's breakout time to a nuclear weapon is shorter than it was when we gathered here just 1 year ago. I have said it before, and I will say it again. We must never, 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 ever allow Iran to become a nuclear-armed power. Never. The question is, how do we achieve that goal? As the principal architect of so many of the U.S. sanctions imposed on Iran, I know that they are among our most effective tools. But here's something I also know. Maximum sanctions pressure on its own is a tactic, not a strategy. We need a strategy, one that uses diplomacy to ensure Iran has no pathway to nuclear weapons. As some of you may have heard, I'm working with Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina on a plan to signal bipartisan support for a concrete diplomatic strategy. We must find a way to get Iran back to the negotiating table. We must be willing to use the right economic and diplomatic levers to engage Iran in a serious dialogue about its nuclear weapons program, including its ballistic missiles. We must confront Iran about its support for terrorism in the region. The challenge demands that we restore the power of diplomacy and harness America's unique ability to unite nations in common cause. Senator Graham and I have been talking with our European partners about a multilateral strategy to get Iran back to the table and advance 3 clear goals. No nuclear weapons, no threatening intercontinental ballistic missiles, and no support for terrorism. We must engage Israel and our Middle East partners to forge a new path. As everyone in this room is well aware, a nuclear-armed Iran would pose an unacceptable existential threat to Israel and set off a dangerous arms race in the region. Senator Graham and I believe there may be a path to a regional nuclear energy program that includes both Iran and its Gulf neighbors, and by design is explicitly for peaceful purposes. A nuclear fuel bank administered by the International Atomic Energy Agency with U.S. veto power could prevent misuse and end any pathway to a nuclear weapon. It would end the risk of a nuclear arms race and stop nuclear proliferation not just by Iran, but by its neighbors. And given that chance to have sanctions relief in exchange for verifiable progress in those key areas, no nuclear arms development, no intercontinental ballistic missiles, no money for terrorism, Iran would either have to embrace a real pathway to peace or expose its true intentions, and in doing so, galvanize the rest of the world with us. Now, to those who argue that we must press forward with sanctions alone and nothing else, I only say this. The threat of conflict is real. The stakes could not be higher. And we cannot just cross our fingers and hope Iran changes its behavior. We must find a tangible diplomatic path away from escalatory attacks that threaten the United States, our assets, and our allies. We cannot let heightened tensions and misunderstandings lead us into a war, the cost of which American and Israeli people know all too well. Sadly, Iran is just but one of the many threats facing Israel. Whether it's the demonization of Israel by certain entities at the United Nations, or the isolation promoted by the grossly misguided BDS movement, it is up to all of us to stand up and speak out against anti-Semitism in all of its forms. That's why I condemned the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights for issuing a blacklist of organizations, including American companies, for doing business with Israel. It speaks volumes that they remain fixated on Israel while ignoring the atrocities committed by member states like Venezuela and Cameroon. Together, we must ensure the letters BDS are seen for what they are, biased directly solely at one people and one country by those who should know better. There's no question we come together at a time when anti-Semitism is on the rise worldwide. To many Jewish communities right here in America who have lost loved ones in violent acts of hate, we know that nothing can bring back the lives taken just weeks ago in Jersey City, or last year in Poway, or the prior year in Pittsburgh. But my friends, some things can be done to combat the growing threat of anti-Semitism. Some things can be done to shore up the security of Jewish schools and synagogues and other minority institutions, which I am leading the fight for in the United States Senate in the appropriation process. And surely, some things can be done to disarm hate and to stem the tide of gun violence we've grown so weary of across this nation, something I will not stop fighting for until we pass common sense gun safety reforms into law. I will not be silent. I will continue to stand up for the right of Jews to live peacefully in their communities from Jersey City to Paris to Jerusalem and beyond. In this climate, we must remember there have always been voices on the far right and the far left who seek to castigate Israel and divide those who stand with her. We cannot let them divide us. We cannot be hoodwinked into fighting with each other when what we should be fighting is in common cause for security, for democracy, for our values, and for human rights. We must remember that diversity is our strength and our capacity to build solidarity, our greatest weapon. And we must remember why we are pro-Israel a position I've always believed is derived from the better angels of our nature. Hope over fear, democracy over despotism, human rights over hatred. These values make the U.S.-Israel relationship strong. These values keep bipartisan support for Israel alive. And these values sustain a partnership between two democracies that has spanned multiple presidents, prime ministers, congressional majorities, and Knesset coalition. These values do not belong to Democrats or Republicans. They belong to the American people. They belong to the Israeli people. And they belong to all people who know what it's like to be oppressed and who value a participatory political system rooted in justice, equality, and the rule of law. As usual, yesterday I was here at the reception, and then I see so many, I am inspired by the many young people who are here today. So many of these young people have encountered the ugliness I mentioned earlier on your college campuses, and yet you continue to stand up for what's right. When I was a young man, I drew inspiration from a great leader named Robert Kennedy, who once said, "Moral courage is a rarer commodity than bravery in battle or great intelligence." To those students, I ask you continue to display moral courage. Continue to lead by example. Continue to stand up for truth, justice, and equal rights. Because, as Bobby Kennedy also once said, each time a man stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build the current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. So to all the young people here today, never forget that each of you has the power to create a tiny ripple of hope, and that together these tiny ripples of hope can grow into waves of powerful change, waves that can build into a tsunami of hope, and I know in my heart will carry the U.S.-Israel relationship forward for generations to come. Thank you. God bless you. God bless the state of Israel and the United States of America.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.